Alright, this is 10-Minute Technique, the series where I show you an easy writing technique you can take away and add to your own writing in around about 10 minutes. Today I'm talking about motifs, something I come back to time and time again. It's a joke about motifs, never mind. Anyway, in case the term is new to you, a motif is an image or a sound or an action that recurs time and time again in your story. It has symbolic significance and it contributes towards the themes of your story. Motifs can be open and large, like settings, for example. A Gothic house might represent evil in a story, and that can be a motif. But for the purposes of this video, I really want to focus in on smaller visual motifs, images really that contribute towards the themes of an overall story, and I'll give you some examples as well. So why are motifs important to storytellers like us? Well, it's because they back up the meaning or the message of the story, but those things tend to be more conceptual, like good beating evil or love beating hatred. It's really hard to convert the meaning of concepts like that into literal words on the page, especially if you want to be interesting and entertaining for a reader. Words fail us when we try to describe a concept like morality or goodness to a reader, especially when we're doing it time and time again. That's going to get pretty old for a reader pretty quickly. That's where we can use a motif. A motif can stitch together the story and the meaning so that while your readers are invested in all the twists and turns of your plot or your characters, you can just use a motif just to remind them while we're really there of what it is that your book is trying to accomplish. To bring this to life, let's look at an example as we always do, and I make no apologies, this example is from The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's a pretty often talked about motif, but for good reason. In the post-apocalyptic, burned-out wasteland that the story takes place in, the only people that have survived have done so by abandoning all human morality. As the two characters, the father and his young son, navigate the literal road through the country in freezing conditions and nearing starvation, they encounter cannibals and murderers and all kinds of human evil. How the father fights this evil and holds it at bay against the purity and the innocence of his little boy is by using a motif. Here's the best and clearest mention of that motif where the father explains it to the son. You have to carry the fire. I don't know how to. Yes, you do. Is it real, the fire? Yes, it is. Where is it? I don't know where it is. Yes, you do. It's inside you. It was always there. I can see it. If you've never read the book, you may be struck by how simple and sparse that dialogue is. That's just the style that it's written in. I take it to be a father trying to explain complicated concepts to a little boy, but it's just how it's written. But anyway, carrying the fire. This is a strong motif that recurs throughout the entire book. It crops up fairly often. It's a device with which the father reassures the son that despite occasions where they've had to do things that are morally bad, they're still good inside, or they're still the good guys. The fire is a motif for the goodness and the kindness and the human warmth that they still possess despite that being totally lacking from the rest of the world around them. The fire that they're still carrying feels like the last struggling ember in this encroaching darkness. To have a simple exchange of the child asking the father, are we still carrying the fire? Instead of trying to explain all of that in literal terms time and time again is so much more effective. It wouldn't be as clear or as compelling or as symbolic if they just had literal conversations that said, even though we did that thing that we didn't really want to do but we had to do, we're still the good guys, right? We're still okay. If that was how that theme was presented throughout the course of the whole book, I think the point that the author was making would really start to become pretty laboured and feel really overdone. Instead, it's packaged up into this simple motif of the fire, which the author can use to remind the reader why they're there. And from a writer's perspective, that's way easier than examining human morality time and time again throughout your novel. Carrying the fire is a very simple motif, but without it, the meaning and the message of the book just wouldn't be as clear. There is one particular reference to carrying the fire in the book, which I think is the best one overall, but I'm not going to talk about it here for fear of spoiling the story. Instead, I'll give you an example from a story that I'm not concerned about spoiling at all because it's my own work. It's from my first novel, which will never see the light of day for various myriad reasons. But one thing I feel like I did do well with it is use a motif. My main character was this troubled teenage kid who couldn't quite keep up with the world, and something really bad had happened to him in his past which he felt really responsible for, and it turned into a complex for him. And as I was writing that, I was trying to think about how I could show that to the reader. I could have just told them because the story was written in first person, so I could have just had the teenage kid say, I feel responsible for the bad things that happen to everyone. Every bad thing that happens is my fault. But I'm sure we can all agree that's not too compelling. It's very simple and too straightforward. I realised I couldn't really achieve the effect that I wanted that way, so I thought of an image instead and turned that into a motif. Instead of the kid just describing how he feels responsible for the bad things that are happening to people around him, I could actually connect him to the people around him. The motif and the image I used was strings going from him to everybody else in the story. Here's some examples of the strings motif at several points in the book. The writing is not the best because it was my first attempt at a novel, so just ignore it if you can and focus instead on the motif. All the time I feel like everyone and everything is tied to my hands with strings like a kite, but not always in the air. I try to carry on with things with them pulling at me, but the strings get caught on things and pull me this way and that, and the strings cut into my hands, but I keep hold of them because I don't know what will happen if I let go of them. So this part is fairly early on in the novel where I'm trying to do the legwork. I'm trying to establish a really strong visual image for the reader of these strings. I'm trying to let the reader know long form what these strings represent, what the motif is going to be used for. I then went on to use it multiple times throughout the novel. I stopped dead and looked at whoever was in my seat, and they looked frightened, and I told them it was okay even though I wasn't sure it was because they weren't supposed to be there. But I picked up their string and tied it to my wrist for them so they wouldn't have to worry about it, because I can worry for everyone. So this was used towards the middle of the book. I was kind of reminding the reader of this motif and what it really meant. The pressure of feeling responsible for things that you really have no control of. I used it multiple times in the book, and then the final time I used it was towards the end where the character starts to have a bit of a breakthrough. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of cars passing, going in the other direction. They made cutting swoosh sounds, and I felt like each one was cutting through one of my strings, and I didn't know whether I wanted to lose them or not. Tying the meaning and the message of your book into a motif like this gives you a really nice opportunity to wrap everything up at the end. By referring to the motif one last time, you can make the reader recount everything that's happened throughout the book, and they'll see where that motif cropped up and how it contributes towards the themes of the story. My top tips for using a motif in your story is to keep it small and simple. Keep it something that everybody will understand, something universal. Use that motif as a string, no pun intended, to tie together the meaning and the message of your story and the events and the actions of your plot. Speaking of tying stuff together, awkward segue, if you're looking to connect with other writers, feel free to join our Discord writing community. We share work, we talk writing, we support each other. It's open to all ability levels. The link's in the description, so we'd love to see you there. My aim with this channel, as always, is to support other writers and to help them develop their writing as I develop mine. I want to help you tell your best story. So if you want to be a part of that too, consider hitting the subscribe button down below for more videos like this every week. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.